Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is some slow looking and reflective writing. And so if you have your journal, open it up to a clean page or just a piece of paper works well. If you don't have the journal yet, you can use a piece of paper and add it to your journal, add it to your journal later. But we're going to start with that clean page today. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but to just kind of talk about what we're going to be doing, I'm going to show some images and we're going to take some time really looking at these images, noticing details, feelings, colors, light, just really kind of diving into these images. If you've been a part of our Gather series, what we're doing today is kind of similar to that process, but it's we got a little extra that we're adding to it. But we're going to be looking at some images today and kind of breaking them up. I think oftentimes when we look at art or any kind of artwork, and we go into museums, we spend just a short amount of time looking at the image itself before moving on. Maybe we spend time reading the plaque beside it, but we spend a really short amount of time looking at the image itself. And so what I want to encourage us is to really spend time today really looking at that image, noticing those details. Maybe the images that we've seen today are ones that you've seen before, but I want to encourage you to really kind of spend time with it today. The images that we're going to be looking at, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The images that we're going to be looking at are all paintings done by the artist Edward Hopper. He may be someone that you've seen before, work that you've seen before. He is actually an American realist painter. His dates are, let me look really quick. His dates are 1882 to 1967. So he was painting around the turn of the century. He's mostly known for his oil paintings, right? But he was also a watercolorist and he did some printing too. So he did some etching. But he's actually acknowledged as one of the most important realist painters of the 20th century. Hopper, I have a quote that I want to share. Well, I'm just realizing now that I don't have who that quote is attributed to, so I apologize for that. But this is a quote that I found about Hopper's work. Hopper created subdued drama out of commonplace subjects, layered with poetic meaning, inviting narrative interpretations. And I share that quote to say, one of the things that I appreciate about Hopper's work is that it does feel like you're looking at this movie still. You are seeing like a moment in time, and automatically you want to start thinking about like the story or what's happening in there. So if you've seen his work before, you kind of know what I'm talking about. One of the things that I appreciate about Hopper is, which may probably be frustrating to a lot of people, is that when he was ever asked about his artwork or the meaning behind it, he would simply respond with, everything you need is on the canvas. He wouldn't give his interpretation of it. He totally put it on the viewer to pull out meaning. And I think that's wonderful. It's one of the great things about art is that we all have different backgrounds. We grow up in different ways. So we look at art, we see them through different eyes. And so by sharing our perspectives, we get a really wonderful like more rich, more full experience, I think. You may see something I don't see. I may see something you don't see. But by sharing what we see, like I said, we get a better experience, I think. And so we're going to go into our practice today just by looking. Just by looking. I'm going to have this PowerPoint up and we're going to kind of go through an image and talk about it too. So let me go ahead and move to the image. So you may have seen this image before, but just take a moment and look at it. Before we say anything or talk about anything, just take a moment to notice this image. Notice the colors, the light, the lines, the shadows, the figures. Just spend some time with this image right now. So what I want to do is just take a moment and kind of share some of the things that we're seeing. And I'm going to be writing down some of the responses, as many as I can. So go ahead. What are some of the things that you're noticing in this image? And know that there are no wrong answers. So what are some of the things that you're noticing in this image? Yeah. So thank you everyone for discussing this image with me, sharing your thoughts. I love how this conversation is going, especially the different perspectives that we're getting to. I know one of the things that kept coming up was, is it loneliness? Is it isolation? Is it sadness? Is it contemplation? Is it reflection? And I think what's great is that we can interpret it in so many different ways, for sure. So thank you. Or boredom. I see someone just put boredom in there too. She could be bored. But I think that's, again, what's so great about art pieces is that we can pull out our own narratives. And Hopper, just as we were sharing just a little while ago, a lot of his paintings kind of invite that story to come to fruition here. You want to kind of play it out. And so I want to I'm going to stop sharing and focus on my hands really quickly. And so I've been writing down some of the things that everyone was saying. And so I'm gonna kind of go through a little writing process today, kind of taking what we've observed and making it into kind of a story here. And so I want to start off. We were looking at this image, and Hopper has it titled New York Movie. But thinking about the things that we've observed in this piece, what are some, like, what's a title that we should give it? What's a good title for this? Setting aside his title, New York Movie, what would be a good title? We've had contemplation a couple times, so let's do contemplation as our title. So I'm going to go ahead and write down, I'm going to work on a separate piece of page and add it to my journal so I can just see the two sides. But I'm going to go ahead and write contemplation as our title. All right. So looking at some of the things that we talked about, I've kind of got a list here. What would be a good first line? Thinking about these different lines that we wrote down, and I'll just kind of read through them. Um, she's very well styled, lots of reds and blues. She is the focus. She works here. She's an usher, isolated. The light separates her. She's contemplating. She's reflecting. So many empty seats. She's captured by internal thought. Light is coming from two sources. Why is she standing? Silence, shadows. She's next to the stairs. Escape. Ornate theater. Authentic movie screen. Hard and soft. Luxurious. The stairway is enticing. Red and gold. Everyone is by themselves. Overhead lights. Maybe she's waiting. Well, actually, I think we have our poem already. That sounded really nice. All those thoughts together just kind of flowed. Sometimes, or in the past, when I've done these poetry based off of what we're viewing, we spent some time kind of coming up with that first sentence, that opening paragraph, and then just kind of taking what we've written and kind of plugging it in to create that poem. But if I'm being honest, I really like the way this sounds together. All these different observations that we had while looking at this image, I think give a really great example of meaning behind this piece, right? So we'll go ahead and stop that one here, I think, because I think that one's in a good space. Well, let's go back. I'm still going to call this one contemplation. So I'm just going to write as the top. And this is our poem that we've written together, which is kind of nice. But now what we're going to do is I'm going to open to a clean page, and I want to encourage you to do that too. Start with a clean page. And we're going to look at the next image here. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight again. But as we look at this next image, I want you to take time, and instead of voicing it or putting it in the chat, I want to encourage you to write down your observations. It doesn't have to be in a complete sentence. It can be bullet points like what I was doing. But I want to encourage you to take a moment and just kind of look at this next image. It may be one you've seen before, but spend some time with it and start writing down your observations, maybe what you're seeing, what it makes you feel, what associations you have or memories that come up. But take some time to really look at this image. Let me scroll to that next image. Like I said, it may be one that you've seen before, but take your time with it. Notice the details, the colors, the light. Notice the figures in this painting, the shapes that show up. Notice those details. When you're ready, let's take the next few moments and just start writing down your observations. And I'm going to do it for myself too. I'm going to write them down. But take a moment and start writing down your observations. Know that you don't have to share this with anyone. So you can be as honest or like misspell it. I'm sure I do that quite a bit. It doesn't have to be complete sentences, like I said. It can be bullet points. But just start writing down your observations from this painting. Write down the emotion that this brings up, the colors that you notice, if there is a memory that it makes you think of. Just take your time with it. Bullet points or sentences. Knowing that whatever you write down is right because there's no wrong answer here. What are you observing? What are you seeing? What are you thinking of? As you're writing down, um, as you're writing down your observations, go ahead and take a moment and think about what this title might be. Hopper entitled it Nighthawks, which is a fitting title. But if you could name it something, thinking about your observations, if you could name it, give it a title, what would you give it? And just take a moment and write that down too. One of the great things about poetry is that, I think a lot of times we think of poetry having to rhyme or having to be in a sort of rhythm. But the truth is, anything really goes when it comes to poetry, because poetry is an expression, right? I am not a writing expert, but I think there's something that's really enjoyable about taking the time to really slow look and really observe these paintings specifically, but just images in general, and really process in written form, like what we're seeing, maybe how it makes us feel to look at it, or what pops into our mind as we're viewing it. And it's interesting to think about where our mind takes us as we're looking at these images. One image may feel comfortable to one person, but may cause anxiety for another. And that's okay. We don't have to see the same things or have the same associations when it comes to viewing these images.